The business jet was about to take off. The sunset slanted through the large windows, pouring a layer of golden honey on everything. The spacious seats were covered in high-quality leather, and the exquisite champagne glasses were placed on the armrests, as if here people were not buying a ticket, but buying the feeling of belonging to another world. Marcus entered the first-class cabin in a navy suit that was as well-tailored as his calm demeanor. Beside him, his wife, Elena, wore an elegant white dress, her hair neatly tied in a bun, her hand resting lightly on her little boy's shoulder. Noah, about 6 years old, hugged a worn-out teddy bear that still smelled of his mother's familiar laundry detergent. The three of them sat down like any other passenger, no noise, no fanfare, just quietly enjoying the moment before the sky opened up. But in that space, peace was not for everyone. Claire, a flight attendant with blonde hair tied back in a bun and eyes as cold as morning glass, walked with a measured stride. She smiled vaguely at the other passengers, but as she approached Marcus's family, her face changed color, the smile falling away like thin paint peeling off in the wind. "Excuse me," her voice was steady but lacking in warmth. "I need to check your first-class tickets." Marcus leaned forward, took the ticket from his jacket pocket, and presented it without protest. His gaze did not shy away nor challenge, but simply met the look he was all too familiar with: suspicion. Claire took the ticket, her eyes scanning it, as if she didn't believe the printed words. No apology, no explanation, just a stifling silence, as if the air in the cabin had thickened. Elena sat up straight, her hand gently squeezing her son's. There was an unspoken weariness in her eyes, the weariness of someone who had proven too many times that they deserved their place. Claire returned the ticket without saying anything more, her eyes still cold. Noah looked up at his mother, his dark eyes sparkling like a small lake in a gentle breeze. His voice was a whisper, just loud enough for the two adults to hear, but it resonated like a bell that struck straight into the minds of those who were watching. "Mom, are we being chased away because we look different?" Helena shivered slightly. Marcus looked down at his son, his eyes for a moment filled with silent pain. The pain had no form, no blood, but it cut like a thin gash, deep and slow to heal. Claire stood there, saying nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. Marcus quietly put the ticket back in his pocket after Claire checked it. Everything on the ticket was correct. First class, clearly printed name, on-time flight. He had done nothing wrong. But there was something in the air like a stain on white silk that kindness could not mask. Claire remained standing. She didn't walk away as if she was done. Instead, she took a slow breath, then spoke as if delivering a sensitive but necessary message. "Sir," she tilted her head, her voice laced with false regret, "we just received a complaint from another passenger about being uncomfortable sitting near your family." Each word falls as light as a feather, but when it hits the ground, it carries the weight of a boulder. "We advise you to voluntarily leave this area. It's just to avoid unnecessary trouble. You understand?" Marcus looked up, his eyes meeting hers, not angry, not loud, but not bowing either. "You're telling me that our tickets are valid, but our presence isn't?" His voice was low, deep and clear like finely polished metal. Claire blinked, shrugging slightly as if she were just a messenger, nothing more. "I'm just following protocol. If you don't want to cooperate, I'll have to report to airport security when I land." The coldness in his voice no longer concealed anything. It wasn't about the rules. It wasn't about the tickets. It was about the seats they shouldn't have the right to occupy. Elena placed her hand on Marcus's, a soft whisper. "Marcus, don't." She didn't finish the sentence, but her eyes held everything: exhaustion, fear, and the instinct to protect her family. Noah was still sitting between them, clinging to his mother's hand, eyes wide, not crying, but something in his eyes was broken. Marcus clenched his jaw, then dropped his hands to his lap. His palms were sweaty. He had sat in meetings with bank CEOs, walked into rooms where every glance counted, but he had never had to fight to sit next to his wife and children in a seat he had paid for like everyone else. He wanted to stand up, to say this was wrong, and he wouldn't stay silent. But he also knew one wrong move, one unflattering reaction, and his entire family could be dragged off the plane amid suspicious stares and rolling phones. And so he chose the hardest way, to remain silent. But that was not surrender. It was the tenacity of a man who knew that there are battles. You have to wait for the right moment to truly win. Claire turned away, leaving behind her a suffocating atmosphere like ashes after a fire. The story isn't over. It's just beginning. Although the first-class cabin was designed to be separate from the rest of the plane, with warm lighting, free-flowing wine, and spacious leather seats at that moment, it was no different than a stage where the Marcus family was thrust into the spotlight in a cruel drama, a play of power and prejudice. A soft click sounded from the cabin door. A man in a black suit, a name tag glittering on his left breast, entered with a practiced, stiff expression. The flight manager called in as a neutral solution to a situation that had already been predetermined. No questions asked. No need for confirmation from either side. He walked over, his voice flat as if reading from a script. "I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but for safety reasons and based on feedback from the crew, we have had to ask your family to leave the plane." Safe. A carefully chosen word because it cannot be refuted. It is the perfect shield to hide things that cannot be said directly. Elena clutched her husband's hand. Her face had been pale since Claire had turned away with a sneer, but now tears were welling up in her eyes, silently suppressed. Not because she was being sent away, but because the 6-year-old beside her was witnessing the first real truth about the world she would grow up in. They stood up, all three of them. No arguing. None of the chaos that some in the cabin seemed to be waiting for, an excuse to shake their heads. Marcus put his hand on his wife's back, protectively, but also to steady himself. Elena wiped away her tears, trying to smile at him, a twisted, heartbreaking smile. Noah still didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing. People were looking at them, not in a welcoming way. Their footsteps echoed in the aisle, lost in the suffocating silence of the cabin. Under the soft lighting, unfamiliar eyes avoided, looking down at their phones or magazines as if not looking would make the wrongdoing disappear. Only Claire watched their every step as they left, her lips curling slightly, a wordless satisfaction, like someone who had just cleaned a stain from a high-quality velvet carpet. And then a soft fall, like a scratch in the silence. The teddy bear. Noah turned, about to go back, but Marcus was already in front of him. He bent down, picking up the old toy that had accompanied his son on so many trips. As he stood up, his hand gently squeezing the teddy bear, his eyes met Claire's, and time froze. For that brief second, he didn't need to say anything. No need to get angry, no need to emphasize the humiliation. Just that look, calm, deep, and unmistakable, was enough to make Claire look away for the first time that day. Because deep in that look was a message without words. You think it's over? You've just begun something you don't understand. Stepping off the plane, Marcus bent down to hand the bear back to Noah. The boy hugged it, still unaware that his father had just planted a silent seed, but one powerful enough to shake up an ostensibly untouchable system. The airport lobby had never felt so cold, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the feeling of being kicked out of a place you had paid to belong to, legally, politely, and clearly. Elena sat silently on the metal bench, holding Noah's hand, her eyes still red. What mother wouldn't be devastated when her child witnessed that? Marcus took a few slow steps away, not in a hurry, not in a panic. He just needed some space to breathe. He pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. Not to complain, not to vent, but to activate a mechanism that few people in this world had access to. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but each word seemed to be engraved in the air. Activate emergency on flight NY789. Stop flight, call control directly. He didn't scream, he didn't accuse, he didn't need to explain. And that absolute calmness carried more weight than any rage. In the distance, Elena raised her head. Her eyes were slightly surprised, not because of what Marcus had just said, but because of the way he had said it. The way a man who had been insulted could still maintain his dignity, but also not let the wrong things stand. Noah was different. He didn't know what flight NY789 meant, but he sensed something had changed. His eyes were on his father, no longer the man who had just been kicked out of first class, but a taller figure, a man who didn't need a cape to be a superhero. And in that moment, in silence, a great lesson was passed on. True power does not need to be ostentatious. It just needs the right time, and the right people. An hour passed. Flight NY789 still hadn't left the runway. The whispers spread through first class like a feverish whisper. Why the delay? There was no storm, there was no mechanical problem. But something was more obvious, an unnatural silence amid the usually minute-by-second procedures. Claire stood by the door, tablet in hand, pretending to check the passenger list, trying to keep her face straight, still cold. A few passengers walked by, giving her confused looks. But Claire just pursed her lips, trying to believe everything would be okay. I did the right thing. I had the right. The sound of leather shoes echoed softly on the aisle, not hurriedly, but decisively. 3 people wearing airline uniforms entered the cabin. The leader, a middle-aged man, neat in appearance, with a face that seemed to have no concept of extra emotions. "Mrs. Claire?" She turned around, almost smiling as if someone had finally come to explain for her. But before the smile could appear, the voice cut her off. "I have been sent to inform you. You are suspended immediately, and likely to be terminated." The words hit the deck like a blow to the spine. All sound stopped. An elderly couple held their breath. The man reading the newspaper behind Claire slowly lowered his paper. Claire looked around as if searching for evidence that she had misheard, but no one came to her defense. Not a word of justification was uttered. The other representative looked straight into her eyes, his voice not trembling. She was abusive towards passengers, refusing service without justifiable reason, especially to the family of Mr. Marcus Evans. He paused for a beat, as if to let the words sink in. "The chairman of the investment board who has the power to freeze all operations of the company for 24 hours if he deems it necessary." Claire stood rooted to the spot. The chill that ran down her spine wasn't from the air conditioning, it was from the truth. No one yelled, no one raised their voices. But each sentence, each word, stripped away the illusion of power she thought she held. And this time, there was no contemptuous look from Claire. There was only the astonishment of the crowd, and the price of arrogance paid right in the sky. There was no noise in the personnel room, just a long silence, long enough to hear the ticking of the clock in her mind. Claire sat there, alone. No more confident smile, no more standing tall in the first-class cabin. Just a woman temporarily stripped of her role, but still fully herself. Her phone lit up. Not a call, but a memory wrapped in a frame. Claire flipped through the old photos, hoping to find something that would make today more understandable. The picture appeared a rustic scene. 5-year-old Claire nestled in her young mother's arms. The woman held her child tightly, her eyes looking into the distance. In her eyes was protection, love, but there was also something cold and sharp like a knife hidden behind the velvet. And Claire suddenly remembered. Not direct words, not written lessons, but the times her mother squeezed her hand a little tighter whenever someone different passed by. The wary looks, the whispers that were not malicious but never harmless. No one taught her to hate, but no one taught her to look at the world without caution. Now that the dust has settled, Claire realizes, prejudice doesn't need to be shouted out loud. It just needs to be repeated, generation after generation, enough times to become subconscious truth. And perhaps her biggest mistake was not her actions today, but living for too long in a belief system that no one had ever challenged. Claire shed tears not because she had been suspended, but because in that moment she understood for the first time that there was pain she had caused, that she had been a victim of all along. A form of contagion that was colorless, odorless, but left silent scars on the recipient and the giver. The plane was the same old plane. The brown leather seats still reclined with a gentle thud. But as Marcus's family stepped back into first class, something was different. The atmosphere wasn't tense, but it wasn't comfortable either. The staff had changed the Asian man, polite, bowing in apology with all the sincerity he'd learned in crisis training. Marcus nodded, neither forgiving nor blaming. Elena held his son's hand as if afraid of another surprise. Only Noah, still 6, but with eyes that were no longer as innocent as they had been that morning, turned his head to look around. Claire stood at the back of the cabin. No uniform, no name tag, just her crossbody bag and her averting gaze. She said nothing, didn't need to say anything, just part of the background, not the one in power this time, but the one emerging from a silent collapse. Noah paused. His little hand let go of his mother's, and what happened next was not in any script the studio had prepared. The boy walked towards Claire, slowly, timidly, but not afraid. Standing before the woman who had humiliated his entire family, Noah raised his head, his voice small but clear. "You're going to study again, right?" Claire looked up, her eyes met his. No resentment, no malice. Just a question. Dead simple. And in that moment, all the sounds in the cabin faded away. Claire didn't reply. There was no need to elaborate, she just nodded very slightly, like a heartbeat missing the first beat of awakening. No one was sure what was in that nod. Was it remorse? Was it embarrassment? Or was it just old pride accepting that it had been cracked? The plane taxied. The yellow light poured in through the windows, illuminating every face. No one won, no one lost. There were only people, wounded and hopeful, learning to live together under the same sky again this time. Not through power, but through the choice to be human.